What is creativity? Many of you will probably answer that creativity is thinking outside the box and generating unconventional ideas. These are correct answers, but creativity is much more than this. Defining what is creativity has been considered one of the most difficult tasks of the social sciences. Imagine that in the scientific literature, over 50 definitions have been proposed, and probably many more will be. Indeed, its concept is constantly changing and evolving according to the socio-cultural environment and technological changes around us. So, how can we define it? What are the fundamental elements of creativity and what should we do to be more creative? To answer these questions, we have involved our experts that study creativity from different perspectives. Vlad Galaveanu, Associate Professor at Webster University Geneva and Director of Webster Center on Creativity and Innovation. Ingun Johanne Ness, Senior Researcher at the Center for the Science of Learning and Technology at the University of Bergen. Giovanni Emanuele Corazza, Full Professor at University of Bologna and founder of the Marconi Institute for Creativity. Thanks to our experts, you will have a broader overview of what creativity is. What is creativity?
Creativity is the process by which meaningful novelties emerge within and especially in between minds. This definition, I think, calls our attention to a few things. First, while we talk about creative people and objects, what are actually creative are our actions and interactions. Second, creative actions strike a balance between novelty and meaningfulness. Novelty alone can be bizarre, not creative. Meaningfulness can lead to the conventional if there is no surprise associated with it. Third, creativity doesn't take place inside isolated minds. It builds on networks of collaboration that extend well beyond individuals and within society. The myth of the lone genius, an idea with old historical roots, tells us that people need to be disconnected in order to create. Reality shows that the deeper and more meaningful connections we establish with our society and culture, the greater the chance for meaningful novelties to emerge.
If we look at the word creativity, the roots of the word are Latin. Creare, bringing forth or producing, and crescere, arising or growing. How we define creativity will also depend on whether we take an individual or a social cultural approach to creativity. From the individual approach, creativity refers to the individual person and processes associated with a single person. If we look at creativity from a social cultural perspective, and this is also where I position my research, we are interested in how people work together in social and cultural systems. A definition then could be creativity is the creation of a valuable, useful new product, service, idea, procedure, or process by individuals working together in a complex social system. Note that this definition includes both useful, new, and products, and we are also paying attention to the social aspects with people working together in complex systems. This definition includes the double criterion of novelty, originality on the one hand, and appropriateness, usefulness, and value on the other. A question to ask is, of course, who decides what is useful or novel? Appropriateness and novelty can be judged and recognized as socially valuable in some way to the community only by a social group in the social cultural tradition.
According to its dynamic definition, creativity is a context-dependent phenomenon that requires potential originality and effectiveness. This definition has broad coverage and goes beyond the so-called standard definition of creativity, which requires the immediate recognition of originality and effectiveness, and doing so gives only a static picture, focusing on the here and now. On the other hand, by inserting the keyword potential, the dynamic definition emphasizes the creative process. It contemplates both creative achievement and creative inconclusiveness, and projects the value of creative ideas into the future, allowing dynamic variations in space, time, and culture. Finally, the dynamic definition allows to consider creativity even beyond the human species, to understand its role in the development of our cosmos through the dynamic universal creativity process.
What are the fundamental elements of creativity?
Creativity is best thought about as a system. Individual minds and brains have an important contribution to play within the system, but like with any system, the whole is more than the sum of parts. And this whole necessarily includes, in the case of creative expression, other people, objects, places, and the cultural tools that make creativity possible. In the past, I discussed this ecology of creativity in terms of the 5 A's, or the interactive, co-evolving relationship between 5 key elements: actors, audiences, actions, artifacts, and affordances. Actors refer to the individuals or groups who initiate a creative process. Audiences refer to their collaborators, competitors, and anyone impacted by or using the creative outcome. The actions involve more than creative thinking and go back to acts of making, interpreting, and transforming that substantiate creative work. Artifacts are the products of creativity that can be symbolic or material, oftentimes both. Last but not least, affordances designate those qualities of objects within our environment, for instance, of the tools we use to create, that make our creative actions possible. Certain cultural tools afford specific uses, others do not. The story of creativity is, in many ways, that of actors engaging in actions that reveal new affordances towards the production of surprising and meaningful artifacts that engage a range of audiences.
What are the fundamental elements of creativity? How we answer this question will again depend on how we understand creativity. From a social cultural perspective, we are interested in the social and relational processes, and not only what happens within one person's mind. Instead, we recognize the polyphonic nature of relationships and the need to engage in a relational dialogue. Polyphony is about many voices and different perspectives, but where every perspective has equal value. I have previously discussed how creativity, at its most fundamental, is characterized by polyphonic imagination. Such imagination can be seen as a fundamental element for creativity, and it involves how imagination is about combining knowledge in new ways, how diversity and tension between perspectives act as a fuel for imagination, and how emotions and a safe environment supports imagination.
The fundamental elements are best described in a model of the creative thinking process. We dedicated our own model to Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci, in fact, becomes an acronym that identifies the 5 key mental states in the creative process. The first is identified as DAV, drive, attention, and volition. In order to enter the creative process, we need a decision, an investment, an excess energy expenditure above and beyond the minimum necessary for conventional thought. This is the drive, which has both a cognitive component, attention, and a motivational component, volition. The first I in Da Vinci stands for information, which contains the fundamental ingredients that feed the creative process. Both relevant information and unexpected sources of inspiration should be contemplated. The N stands for novelty generation, which can be achieved in 2 modalities, convergent and divergent. C stands for creativity estimation, the active extraction of value from the generated ideas. You could find that you achieved your goal, but there is room here for serendipity too. Finally, the second I in Da Vinci stands for implementation, or turning creativity into innovation.
What can I do to be more creative?
Creativity doesn't follow a formula. If it did, it probably wouldn't be called creativity. Having said that, there are many things we can do to foster our own creative expression and that of others. Building on the systemic approach, we need to consider paradoxically the question of how a person can be more creative by looking beyond the person, him or herself. In particular, we would do well to understand the context for creativity or for reduced creative expression built around the individual. These contexts include social relations, forms of material engagement, as well as cultural norms and values. To give a concrete example, creating a context of free expression in which individuals can allow themselves the risk of failing and can enter a playful state of mind are all essential conditions for creativity. How exactly do we create such a climate? These kinds of interventions can only be specific in nature and take into account the ecology of creative expression within a particular setting. One doesn't cultivate creativity in art and in mathematics exactly in the same way. But there are some generalities. Fostering a supportive environment in which the person's creative identity is validated and encouraged is an important factor across contexts. And so is believing in one's own creative abilities, what experts call creative self-efficacy. Collaborating with others to set creative goals and work towards them can go a long way, a lesson most of us know from practice.
What can I do to be more creative? This is a tricky question. I think that there are many ways to do this. And we should try different methods from different approaches and combine them to our individual preference. For instance, why not practice lateral thinking puzzles? This is about flexibility and not following logical cues. This can be fun. Just Google it. And also play with divergent thinking. How many different ways can you use a brick or something else? This is about creating many different ideas and can be measured by quantity, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. And then my favorite, take a different perspective. We are so often just repeating our own behavior. And if this works for us, it becomes quite comfortable and a routine, which is not very creative. But if we do try to see things from a different perspective, this can create a new understanding. One technique is, of course, to use de Bono's 6 thinking hats, or Glavenoux's different perspective taking, or even my own research on taking on different roles in a group. The challenger, the driver, the radical thinker, or control thinker. And rotate to include all the positions and note how this will affect the way you see things and your perspective. Remember that it is also important to pay attention to the environment, because in order to think out of the box, we need to feel that it is safe. I have studied the importance of openness, curiosity, and respect in relation to how we can become more creative in a group.
In order to have a potential for generating originality and effectiveness, the first step is to allow yourself a dedicated time and space for challenging the state of the art. This is a risky activity that cannot be taken up for 100% of your resources. Therefore, you need a good balance between conventional and creative activities, which depends on context. For example, a designer will in general invest more in creativity than a medical doctor. The second key is to be as open as possible to experience. By allowing into your thinking process elements of information that are not necessarily relevant, you can gain prescient sources of inspiration. These can come from interaction with others, exploiting diversity of culture and point of view, but also from individual exploration of diverse fields of knowledge. In fact, an immense number of inventions have been generated by taking a principle from one discipline and exploiting it in another field of knowledge. And the last tip I would like to give you is to be humble and to try to extract the maximum value from all ideas you generate. Truly creative ideas have hidden potential.
Thanks to our experts, we have now a broad overview of what creativity is. Have you changed your mind?